Hi, everybody. I'm Monica Malpass, talking with Bill Rizzo, CEO of Quantum Strategies and author of many books, but his latest is Maximum Accountability, available, by the way, on Amazon, and it's chock full of great ideas for improving business. So let's talk a little bit about what is the main idea behind Maximum Accountability.
Maximum accountability is the credo that my company operates under, Quantum Strategies, as well as a lot of our clients who implement that strategy. And basically, it's just helping people and their employees become maximally accountable to each other so that you can provide them the freedom to be able to operate independently with each other, and then have the ability to be maximally accountable, meaning they know what the goal of the mission is and they can do the things on their own independently of direct supervision entirely.
How does that differ from the normal way companies typically operate? Some people would think it's intuitive or that you just follow your instincts, but it's really far more advanced and highly technical than that, and there's a right and a wrong way to do it.
Sure. So what we like to do is, and when we're working with our teams, is we set up, as the CEO of the company would set up the goals of the organization for what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And we set up those goals, and then my direct reports, I would disseminate their portion of their goals, what they need to do. And then they do that to their team as well, and to their teams down the line. Okay. And what that does is that they know what the goals are and what they need to do. Each of those people in those roles would create tactics to be able to accomplish those goals, which are lead indicators instead of lag indicators.
Right.
And we can talk about that a little later. So by doing it that way, they're setting it up so that we can identify, they know that these are the things that they need to do to accomplish the mission, so that if they don't do it down the line, then their team is not going to make the mission. And if I know I could drill down into the organization, or the CEO of another organization could drill down and see if they're on track to meet their goals.
What is the difference, lead versus lag indicators?
Well, the lead indicator is something that if it's done today, it will lead to the end result of your goal. A lag indicator is, did you make your goal or not? Sometimes, if you have lag indicators are the only way to identify, it's too late to make a decision to change. So if you're utilizing lead indicators to help structure the team and the efforts, if it's not on track, you can make adjustments, add resources, or whatever it may be to make sure you beat your goals.
It's not too late at that point.
It's not too late, yes.
Now, how do you typically go about working with clients besides this assessment? Is there information that you input? Do you do a full-blown report? What's the process?
Well, when we're working with organizations, this is one small part of what we're doing in the HR world, but what we're doing is we typically do a full HR assessment of the organization, and that assessment includes really giving the senior management a whole blueprint of their operation, because leadership, sometimes there's 10 different aspects of HR, and there's a lot of different specialties. You could all talk to different CEOs, and they'll give you a different feeling, like, what do you think HR is? Well, it's onboarding and recruiting, it's compliance, it's different things. But really, to get a full understanding of that, and then not only that, but really show them gaps of where there's potential liability or gaps to increase efficiencies and different things, which is a great tool for the head of HR or the chief HR officer to have. And in small organizations that don't have that, it's a great tool for the CFO, whoever's leading that effort.
So do they have to replace all the existing systems once you do that deep dive and figure out pockets of need? Does it mean kind of a wholesale start over typically?
Typically it does not, because that's a very painful process. What we like to do is just really find out what is an optimal structure, going through that with them. And when we're looking at those systems, saying, okay, what tweaks in those systems or process, so you look at the people, the process, and the systems. And there can be changes that you could utilize to make it more efficient. In some cases, it's changing, pieces of the system. In some cases, it could be changing all the systems. Or in a lot of cases, it's just integrating the existing systems together and let them communicate effectively so that they're all, working
on the same page.
Yes.
Is it often that it's a miscommunication, or just that companies are so busy they've really unifocused, if you will, on one area, and they're not across the board passing the word along?
Well, what happens is that, there's legacy systems that people had, and they had a big investment in it, and it's like, do you want to move from that system where they have some paper and some systems? So it's really getting into the organization and finding out, what their regulatory requirements are, what they're doing, and then finding out what's the best solution to make it easy for them. Transitions are challenging, so you don't want to make a problem worse. So what you have to do is really understand what's going to make them better, and then organizations a lot of times make a big mistake. They rely on a vendor to come in who is selling one particular system, and then they leave it to the existing people to try to fix it. And then what happens, they have a system that's not optimal, and they're trying to do two things at the same time, where our approach typically is evaluate the organization, which system would work best with that organization or combination of systems, and then manage that implementation for them so that we can work with their team, embed it with their team. Because normally the team that's doing the existing work is trying to put a new system in.
At the same time, of course.
And it's not an optimal, that's why transitions are so difficult.
Right, and what's the capital investment that typically entails?
Well, it really depends on the organization and what they're doing. A lot of times you could spread out that capital investment, that the efficiencies pay for it and more, so there's really no upfront cost for the organization. It really depends on the structure.
Okay, so is this type of integration only for HR, or are there other applications?
So we do this type of integrations for, across the company. So we have, clients where we have dead legacy systems in the trash impacting, where pull the information out so that they weren't communicating, and had teams of accountants going through these different spreadsheets. We were able to pull all that information into one source and create a front end so that they would be able to utilize that. We had other organizations that had very large amounts of overtime, the way that they were implementing overtime, and we were able to deploy systems that were able to really cut their overtime by highlighting the areas where if someone, the typical model is someone's going out and you call the person who's, Joe Reliable or Susie Reliable, who you can call, who will take it and who's already in overtime. But if there was a heat map of everyone who could fill that job, and that it's red for, if you call them, it's going to be overtime, green, it's safe, yellow, close to it. It gives the manager the ability to control overtime by going down the list of who they're going to call to come in based on that to cut overtime costs. So there's a lot of ways organizations can really cut costs by implementing effective technology.
Right, makes sense. What are the benefits of choosing maximum accountability?
So maximum accountability is really, it's not a system, it's a way of thinking about things, and it's a way to really streamline the organization to say, we want our people to work, interdependent on each other in teams so that they're able to function effectively. If you look at the war in Ukraine, people are talking about it now, and the big problem that why the Ukrainians are having so much success is the Russian army is under the old way of managing, where they have the staff officers who are the generals. They create the rule, the policy or the plan to do that. And then the people in the field, if they want to make a change, they have to get permission from them. Well, when you're getting shot at, it's hard to get, something to change what's going on. So that's why they're being bogged down and not being able to move forward. In the U.S. military, we use our chain of command is, once the plan is set in place, the field, the non-commissioned officers and the junior officers are able to make decisions on the field, on the battlefield, because they know what the objective of the mission is. Business is no different. If you establish what the goal is of your organization and you're able to pass that down, you should have the people in place that you have trained, you give them the resources, but they're able to make decisions in real time to affect the organization to help your clients.
Because you can't think of every impossibility, or you can't think of every single scenario ahead of time. So you need to have smart people who know the general gist of what you're going for, who can then make some last minute calls.
Exactly, and they're using their, and that you don't have to wait to get in touch with, the vice president to make a decision.
Right, exactly. So what is the quantum year?
So the quantum year is the way we kind of look at it, to have people to be more productive. So if you remember, your college days, all the studying gets done right before exams. You get, in January, you do your workout plan for the year, and you do your goals, and then in November, you look at it, and maybe you still have a couple extra pounds. I'm speaking of myself. So instead of looking at that in those areas, we kind of say the quantum year, we break that down to 12 weeks. And in the 12 weeks of the quantum year, it's, okay, we look at that as a year, and we establish the goals for the year, for the quantum year. And then we have this is the goal, and then from there it's disseminated down, like I mentioned earlier. And then what we do is we create tactics for each of those goals. So each of the goals would have maybe 3 tactics that we need. A good example I'd like to use, because working out is an easy one that everyone can relate with. Instead of saying your goal is to be, in great shape or whatever, and then that's your goal and that's the end of it, and you're going to go to the gym. What you say is, okay, if you want to be in great shape, what are you going to do to get there? Well, I'm going to drink a gallon of water a day. I'm going to do cardio 3 days a week, and I'm going to weight training twice a week, whatever it is. So at the end of the week, you could say, well, I did this, I did that, I'm 30% there, I'm 50% there. So at the end of 12 weeks, if you did those things, you're going to meet your goal because you did the tactics to get there. So that's your lead indicator. If you didn't do that, you're going to know that you either make an adjustment or you're not going to hit your goal. Same in business, same in everything. So if you're able to do that, you're able to get your teams all in line to going in the same direction.
And by putting it in a 12-week lineup, that makes more digestible bites, if you will, or does it just give you a quicker idea of what you're not making an impact on so that you can change it before the rest of the year really happens?
Both. It gives you a sense of urgency.
Right.
Why in the insurance industry, I believe it's something like 70% of the insurance is done in October and November. Are people buying more insurance during that time? Like, what is the reason for that? If you look at industries, there's certain things. So why is it? Why are gyms really busy in January and February? So it's like, if you're able to set those things up so that every day, so if you, in a 12-week year, if you take a day off, it's great to take a day off. But if you do take a day off, that's equivalent to a week vacation in a 12-week year, if you think about that. So it's, how are you doing it to be effective with your time? To manage your time effectively.
Right. So how can technology play a role in improving a company?
So again, we talked about integrations. Some of the things that we have a system that manages this for organizations, where it kind of gives the CEO a look down into the organization and what the goals are. So one of the systems that we developed that's based on this book is that if Maximum Cat is the leadership and performance management. So the goals that you're helping and the tactics you're setting up for your organization, it gives a visual to the leader and all the staff below. As I said, my subordinates, then their subordinates down the line. At the end of the week, each subordinate puts in their tactics, because they worked with their manager, that I'm 50% there, I'm 60% there. So at any time, I could click on and have a visual of, is the organization on track to meet its goal? Because I know if everyone meets their goal, we're going to meet our goals as an organization. And if we're off track, I could say, drill down by checking on what's not on track. This is, Bob's team, Joanne's team. What team is it that is not on track? And then drill down even further and find out what team inside that is not on track. So it gives me complete transparency at my fingertips of where the organization is going and where we need to adjust and make decisions in real time.
And are there other analytics and ways to assess human capital besides that?
Well, so that's one way if you're doing it on that side, and then the other part of that is what works hand in hand in that is what we call our career success manual. And our career success manual is really when someone comes aboard into the organization, building out what their goals are. So instead of them just being an employee of ours, I feel like I work for them as well. My job is to make them be the best that they can be and where they want to go in their career. So how do I do that? Is find out what their goals are for 1, 3, and 5 years, typically like I would do for the organization, both personal and as well as business, and then helping them create a plan to get there. And this plan is we use it in a system where it tracks that, but then on top of that is that, where if they feel that they want to go into a certain area, make sure they have the training that they need, and that would be attached to a learning management system that would deliver that information to them so that they know, for example, if they needed to learn Excel or needed to do public speaking, they would take classes and we would give them access to that information so that they could take that so that they're developing in their career.
Well, what was interesting is that 62% of HR leaders admit that they really are not able to use analytics to figure out the issue at hand, whether it's the human capital issue or systems issues. So that's a two-thirds percentage. That's huge. That means companies are rife with possible, not only not meeting their goals and their bottom line, but also possible lawsuits or problems with the humans.
Yes. So there's 52 different ratios that you could use that are not really being effectively used across recruiting, onboarding, all kinds of statistical analysis that you could do to be able to give actionable information to leadership in the organization. And regardless of the system that you're on, you can, pull that information. We have a proprietary system that we use that will go into your payroll system and we'll build out custom reports that you could get this information at management, and they could go through that information to be able to make decisions on all their employees and how it can be effectively, are they being productive and different things. So there's a lot of tools that are out there that companies don't have the capability of pulling, or just the awareness that they have that information.
How do you determine inefficiencies or duplication, areas that just don't need to be redundant across different parts of your departments?
So if you're doing a human capital assessment, or a position analyzer, we call it, where we go into an organization, we look at the team, and we do an evaluation of that team, and then you could do it just a team or multiple teams, and then you look at and you actually interview the people, and you're saying, okay, what are you doing? What are your day-to-day operations? What is the role that you're doing? Then we do that across the board, and then you kind of look at that where, okay, these are all the things that have to be done to accomplish the mission for this team. Maybe some of them shouldn't be on this team,
right?
And it should be in another department. And then you look at that information. Once you have that, that is really the mother's milk of information, because from there you could derive great things. Like from there you could say, all right, now we know what this job needs to do. How much should we pay that person? What's the industry standard for paying it? How do you monitor their performance?
Right.
That you could develop performance matrix to do that. What skill sets do you need to do this job, so you can say for future people to do that job?
Right.
And what skill sets are transferable to another group, so that you could do business succession, where, later on that would drive into, we know someone senior is leaving, who do we have in the bench? Well, you could go across the whole organization and say, these are the skills that these different people have that would make sense to go into a role like that. So it's the basis for a lot of different things. And then it also helps you with recruiting for that spot, because then you can do your job descriptions and all that stuff from that information.
And what is lead generation maximum accountability? So
lead generation that is actually a sales tool that we developed for recruiting, but it's actually works in other areas. It opens up an opportunity it replaces a salesperson with an automated person.
Okay.
And it goes in and through sites like LinkedIn or whatever, and then you put your criteria of who you want to meet with, and it goes out and connects with them and starts a dialogue. And when the dialogue goes to the person who's interested in continuing the conversation, it immediately goes to you, and then you can call them and set up an appointment. So it's helping you develop relationships with a lot of different people, quickly, because you'd have to go in and link into 100 people.
Exactly.
And then communicate with all of them, and some of them wouldn't be interested. This way it replaces a full-time salesperson doing that. And that's a tool we created. It originally was created for recruiting, because we do a big thing with active recruiting, and we could talk about that later and how that is utilized.
Okay. You started your company 10 years ago, and you have morphed into so many different areas that companies need very quickly. That's just an amazing growth curve. Tell me how you started out and where you are today, how you got there.
So the firm was originally founded under WJR Enterprises, which is William J. Rizzo.
Right.
And we were working with super high net worth families who had a family office or a privately held company, helping them either raise outside capital, manage their personal wealth,
right,
or who were trying to take it to the next level through venture capital, or for going public. And what we realized when talking to these clients, they all had this need for help within their HR HR, but efficiencies across the organization. When they were talking to private equity firms, which I had experience with, that it was gluing up or gumming up the deals because of these emerging possible liabilities with inside there. So what originally would happen was we hired one person to do this for our clients, and now it's a very large part of our businesses on the HR side. And when we started doing that, then it developed into all the integrations that we had to do the integrations for the HR side, which led to doing integrations across the board. So
one division led to the next and down the line.
Exactly. And then the name Quantum for Quantum Strategies is the name of the company. Is, it's in quantum physics. When you see something and you observe it, you affect the difference, which is kind of like affect the change. And then also different parts together make it stronger. That's another part. And basically, by having all these things together, it makes the service that we're delivering much more powerful.
Right, absolutely. This is skills that apply to the boardroom, apply to athletics, apply to life. It's so fascinating to me that really it's so similar to all three areas. How is that possible? What are those?
Well, when it comes to the leadership part of maximum accountability, which is like training and building teams, doesn't matter if it's a baseball team or if it's a military unit, any elite team that you're trying to build, it's really getting the right people and then motivating those people, training those people, and getting them to all buy into what the mission is and taking it to the next level. And that's really, what we really thrive to do. And the things that we do are just part of that. Everything that the services that we just talked about all support that mission or that credo.
And what are some ways to lead a highly effective team? We don't want to give away everything in the book, but just give me some overview of how do you motivate? How do you lead? It's not, intuitive for everyone.
So I would start by what we talked about earlier about how you're doing helping them build their tactics and doing that stuff. Then it's putting them on a team that they feel like they're really part of the team and that they're counting on each other. That's how people get motivated, because they know that what they're doing, how it affects the overall outcome. It's not, hey, I'm sticking in, the Manhattan Project, right? How depressing would that be? You're working on something, you have no idea how it's affecting the other parts.
Right.
This is, you know what you're doing, and you know how it's overall affecting your team, the company you're working for, and society in general, in fact. So it's really getting them involved so that they get the buy-in, because their buy-in is important, because their happiness at work leads them to stay, makes them a better employee and a better service person for our clients.
So it's good to have a tight vision, but also a macro view, the big picture, if you will.
Exactly. When you're, they talk about leading up and down the chain of command in the military, but also what you're trying to do is disseminate the information so that everyone knows what the mission is. And once they know what the mission is, they know what their part is and how it affects it.
It's also, though, about creating a winning mindset. They call it a growth mentality or a growth mindset. How do you create that? Not everybody is good at, telling someone, well, you may not be good at X today, but here are some tools, and I think, we can grow you towards that. Let's give it a couple of months. Growing people is really a different way of approaching, rather than, yes, no, you're not ready yet, we're not hiring you.
Yes, so what I would say is that, the key skill there is critical thinking. And unfortunately, I think that schools aren't doing as good of a job as they used to do in teaching people how to think. And it's really important that you want people to be able to think, because, again, I go back to my my first boss, where he said to me, I don't want you to use your mind, I want you to use yours, right? Because, and he made me, one of the things we talk about, always at our company, don't come to me with the problem, come to me with what the problem is, with some possible solutions, and let's talk about it together. So really getting them to start thinking about it this way, because if you need to be spoon-fed, then maybe you're not a good fit for our organization. But my job as a leader is to train you to do that, and how you do that is by engaging with them and making them think beyond, and that they can do it, and show them examples of what would work and motivate them through positive feedback.
And in fact, some of your best ideas for growth, you had told me, come from some people down in the everyday ranks, right? Who can observe it firsthand and bring it to you and say, look, I don't think we do enough of this, or we can do more of that. And that grows an entire division sometimes.
Sure. So if you look at it, if you think about it, you want to go into an organization and change it to make it better, but you're not going to ask the people who are doing it every day like this. So you really want to say, what are you doing? How can we make this? And we have an open atmosphere. It's like, I think it should be this way. And I'm a strong believer in that. We sit around and debate, and at the end, someone makes the decision and everyone moves forward together. You can't tolerate, well, I think we should have did it that way. That's once the decision's made, we have the best thing on that. Now let's move forward and get it done. And we always try to promote that. And people, as you were alluding to a little bit earlier, is that there's ideas that come out of that, out of these meetings, that develop whole new practice areas. Every one of our practice areas was developed out of someone coming up with an idea, and we said, you know what, that's actually a great idea. How do we do that? And then thinking about it, brainstorming, and bringing on the resources to do that.
But you have to have the trust in your employees that they not only are bright, but they also have the experience and the knowledge, and that they'll develop the know-how.
Well, it's what you do is, our philosophy is always you hire hard and manage lightly, so you're bringing in good people, and then when you bring them in, it's not that you have to build it with everything there. You hire consultants, you hire people, you hire new people that have that skill set within inside your team. You don't have to create everything internally, but you build the ability for them to do it internally.
Which leads us to, there's a difference between managing and micromanaging. What is that?
Okay, so micromanaging, is just when everything has to get done, you have to follow it. Like, I did this, what do you think? And then that person, you have to wear a helmet cam to work. That doesn't work, in our environment at all. And actually, during the interview process, we actually try to tell people that if that's kind of what you want, this is the wrong place.
Right.
Some organizations, that's how they, we work with companies that do micromanage, and we have strategies to try to make it a little better for them. But the best people don't need to be micromanaged. If they need to be micromanaged, they're the people who are unhappy at their job because they feel like they have no, influence. Their decision's not doing anything because they can't even do their job without someone telling them what to do every step of the way.
Right. So why would a company benefit from hiring Quantum Strategies? I know you've laid out literally 4 or 5 ways it can obviously improve revenue, which most companies want to do, obviously. How do you teach them how to attract and retain the top-level talent, not just mid-level and low-level talent, drive their strategy, increase their success? So there's a number of tangible ways using Quantum Strategies can truly benefit a company.
So, right now, recruiting is a big area. Most firms have what we call a passive approach. They put an ad in the newspaper. They ask people to work to maybe post something on LinkedIn, and that's their whole approach to recruiting. Where we're really believers in doing that, but then also have a very robust active approach. And the active approach is you're constantly recruiting. Regardless if you're looking for a job, you're always out there looking. So in every position that we have multiple people in our pipeline who we think would be good candidates. And how we do that is because the best person's not always looking for a job. They may be happy where they're at.
Right.
So you need to be able to say, okay, how do we find them quickly? So that's how that sales engine that we talked about earlier was started to generate, so that we start building those relationships and constantly touching those people and saying, inviting them to our events, even though we're not hiring now, and they know we're not hiring, but to get them to know our culture so we get to know them. Really going out and building that pipeline so that if I'm a law firm or I'm an accounting firm and I lose a tax person, well, I have these relationships with 5 other people that I think are good, and then you're already halfway down the line. They know you, you know them. Now we're actively looking, and you're getting the right people in quicker. So that's a big part of what we're doing on the recruiting side.
Almost having a bench strength, like field recruiting, sort of scouting people, if you will. It does take time and effort and money if you're having to travel the country to find them, but it is a wonderful, quick way to fill in these gaps.
Yeah. And it really doesn't cost that much to do it now with the information age we're in. You can have those relationships, and have that. So it's a good way to do that. And then the next step of that is retaining your existing talent. And how do you do that to get them motivated? And that's what we're talking about with the Career Success Manual and doing things like that, but also engagement strategies, having, workplace events. There's a lot of things that you could do to make people not only feel, but make that you realize and show how much you care about them. It's not a fake feel. It's really important that they understand what their true value is.
And they're happy there and feel like they're moving in a progression. There's a growth potential there, so they can see the end point, if you will.
Hey, most people will leave a company not for money because they're leaving their boss, and they're leaving their boss because they feel like there's not a career path for them. If you have a career success manual, you have that. And guess what? If they're a good employee, they have friends, and they tell their friends how much they love their job. So now there's another pipeline of people that you can recruit from.
Okay. How do you assess how people are doing within a company and how the company is doing? Is that easy to quantify?
Well, what you're working with, how you assess the employee would be by the tactics that we had, and are they meeting those goals? The company success can be done through the ratios that we're talking about, those HR ratios, like what their turnover is, what their how long positions are open. There's a lot of different things that they can look on there for their profitability to try to look at that. We are management consultants that we work on the profitability of their specific industry, but we're dealing with the people capital part and the efficiencies of cost.
And you help them build a blueprint going forward, something they can literally look at and see, A to B to Z.
So when we do an HR assessment for a firm, we go out to evaluate their department, and we look at all their people, and these things that we talked about. Then from there, we can benchmark their company versus the cost of other companies, same size and similar industries and geographic area, to say, are they in line there, what their resources are. Then from there, we also can identify areas of possible risks that are not being there, and areas where they could improve efficiencies or improve things inside the organization. We give that blueprint to whoever, the senior management, whoever is managing that project, and at that point, they could either implement that themselves, or they can hire us to help implement that.
Okay. And now on the other side, when things go wrong and there's damage control needed, how do you help stem the tide when a company comes to you and says, oops, we didn't implement what you suggested, or they hire you late in the game and you're just trying to get up to speed quickly to stop the leaky vessel, if you will?
So there are many times, typically if we're in front of people, it's not because they didn't implement what we did. It would be on the other where we're hired because we're referred in by their attorney or something, because there's an issue that's out there. And that's really what we do the evaluation like we were doing on the other side, and identify what those issues are, and then we help mitigate those issues, whatever it may be. We are not lawyers, but we have lawyers on staff that work with us, and we kind of go through that process to see where we can to fix things, because a lot of the problems when they have the initial one, the bigger ones come later. Like once it is identified from a regulatory agency, then the other ones are coming down the line. But if you're working to fix them, you can head that off. And the problem is a lot of times it becomes in reaction mode, and then the department isn't capable of doing that right then, so they don't have the resources to do that.
And that can lead to
it could lead to bigger issues down the line.
Right.
So
that's not good. All right, so how do you handle diversity training? I know that's a new area, or not new, but an area that you specialize in as well.
So you're better off, a diverse employee population is very good, right? So I'm the big believer on how do you go about doing that? And you don't want to do it by just having quotas at the end or whatever, saying that. But what you want to do is increase your base of where you're recruiting from. So what happens, unfortunately, is that I'm the CEO of a big company, and I worked with someone who was the CFO, or I went to school with someone and who I want to hire, and it's like that network. So how do you get the pool bigger? Well, the pool bigger is if you're looking to attract, you want to get the pool, through that tool that I mentioned earlier, you're going to, like if it's, say you think you're underrepresented in a certain community, and you could go to all the historically, black organizations and colleges and recruit to there. You could go to different places and go out and have them so your pool is bigger. And then by having a bigger, diverse pool, you're going to get better candidates, and the better candidates will rise to the top, and then you'll be able to hire to get that. And I think that that's where people fail in really increasing that base and pool of people they're recruiting from.
And then how do you get those recruits once they're employees? How do you get them up the ranks? Because you need diversity at all levels, right? Even at management and top C office levels.
So cream rises to the top, and you give people the opportunity, and they'll succeed. And you provide coaching and career paths to them. Again, I think the worst thing that you can do is say, have it that they're being promoted for any other reason, but they're great at their job. And the job is to make them great at their job, and they can be great at their job, and just work with them and do that. And to me, it doesn't matter. In the Marine Corps, they used to say you're green or light green, and I think that's the same thing. It's everyone, just work on what they're doing and make everyone rise to the top.
Okay. And are there leadership workshops or specific things that you put into place, not just to have a career path, but to implement that in a methodical way?
It's a way about thinking things. So we have a whole series of workshops that we do on leadership, management, diversity training. Things that are important that, and we do.
So let's talk about you a little bit. You went to Wharton Business School. You're also former member of the U.S. Marine Corps. How did those experiences and that education help bring you to start your company and to write Maximum Accountability?
So it was a combination of both that formal education as well as my life experience of playing athletics and coaching athletics. That all of that stuff I realized were what I thought was innate skills in leading and helping people were not really being implemented across the board. And I kind of, many times I was in a business setting or on an athletic field, and I would see someone doing something, and it just used to drive me nuts about how they were destroying the culture of the team or the organization. And over the years, I did a lot of training, and I started creating a lot of stuff. And what happened was that, urging of people for a long time saying, you should put this down. Because I would be in meetings, I'd be like, oh, you should read this book. You should read this book. Different things I thought would be helpful to them.
Sure.
So with the urging of a lot of people, and then COVID happening, and my son, who happened to be a journalism major, decided to convince that we should put down a lot of my thoughts in writing, and that's how we came up with the book. And Maximum Accountability is something we've always talked about, and that was our credo of Quantum Strategies, that you're maximum accountable. You have a ton of freedom to do things, but that makes you accountable to do the things that need to get done for your team.
And so what is the toughest challenge? Is it to sort of retread and train and educate upper management to do it a new way, middle management, or employees at the sort of boots on the ground level?
So I try not to say it's like a complete retrain, but it's really to give them more information to help them do what they were doing, hopefully before, better, more effectively, and give them a toolkit to do it. But sometimes you have senior people who just are coachable. They're not coachable. You can have junior people that are not coachable as well too. So it's really trying to find the mix of them and give them. It doesn't have to be you have to implement all of it. The beauty of this book or these strategies are it's not a one size fits all. You could take pieces of this and implement the things that you think work for you to make it better, because some things work for some people and some things work for other people.
So they're not codependent. You don't have to have everything for it to work perfectly.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, the more you implement, I think the better off you are. But even in here, we talk about different strategies where, different ways for time management. And I give you, there's several different ways to do that. There's like the Eisenhower method. There's the, Ben Franklin's method. So we talk about, other people had different methods, and then you could utilize one or both or a combination of them.
So what is maximum lead generation, and how does it apply?
So maximum lead generation is a tool that we created. Initially, it was for recruiting and building out our recruiting platform, but it can be used in the sales process. And what it is, it automates a lot of things that are done that you can integrate within LinkedIn or other social media sites, and allows you to automate those processes to make you, when I talk about 4 times more effective, that's a way to become 4 times more effective, because really would eliminate the time that you're spending doing that as a salesperson and gives you more time to be out in front of your clients.
That seems too good to be true. How's that possible? 4 times more successful?
Well, because you're eliminating all the manual things that you're doing with inside those social networks, and you're able to do that in a streamlined way, and then through this program that we built that kind of links in and integrates with that.
That's amazing. And let's talk about recruiting and retention, because those are really key to every company, especially these days with big turnover and a mass population that's coming on board newly from school. We have a lot of opportunity here to get it right or get it wrong.
Okay. So, can you just re-ask the question?
What is the key to recruitment and then retention?
Okay. So, on the recruiting side, it's really, we talk about, a lot of times we do these assessments of the organizations to make sure we have the right skills, looking at a behavioral analysis if that one is done, to make sure we're getting the right fit for the team, because different skill sets, also part of that is different, mental makeups of how they're going to integrate together, so that if you have different teammates that won't get along, then it's not a good fit to do that. So that's part of it. Then it's identifying those candidates through either an active or a passive approach and trying to figure out which are the best candidates for that role, and then building out, a way to touching them, getting them on board, and getting them integrated into the organization. If you hire the right person up front, it makes it so much easier to maintain them and keep them engaged, and retention, because you're bringing them on and you already know what kind of a lot of the things that make them tick, so that the people that are managing them and work with them know the psychological kind of makeup behind them of what makes them. For example, I work closely with several people at my firm on their senior leadership, and I realized when we weren't doing these early on everyone, and like 8 years ago we did one, and I always used the term, well, trust me, it's going to work, we're just going to do this. And one of the things in the analysis was never say trust me to these, because that's like a trigger to them of not shutting down. They don't want to. They want to see proof of it. It's just the personality. And there's little things like that it's not. It's just the way the words you use to communicate with someone can make a big difference in working together.
Right. Absolutely. What is the set of mistakes that you often see companies make? Is there anything that's typical, or is it mostly that they're just handing out, information, too much of it? They're not handing out enough. They assume people read it and understand it. I mean, what are some of the key landmines that you see as you're analyzing companies?
So, as it comes to recruiting or on onboarding, for onboarding, the mistake, or a lot of times people don't have the information that they need, and when they come on, that's your first chance to make the first impression to the employee. So you want to make that good and smooth. So if they, if information is not getting to them, or it's all paper in the process and it's challenging, people don't want to work at a place that is hard to work at. And if you're onboarding someone and everything is all paper, like, hey, fill this paper, come in and fill out an application, or, print the form out, sign it, then rescan it and email it to me instead of having it digitally signed, things like that. It's like, why is it, I can go and do everything with a signature on why isn't it not done that way? So people expect you, if you care about me as an employee, you just hire me. Why are you making me do this extra work to do this? So things like that to make it easier for them to onboard, because that's their first impression of you as an organization and how you're going to deal with it.
What would you say is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? There is a difference, and it can matter, big term on the bottom line.
Sure. So efficiency is, you really want people to be efficient in what they're doing, so that when they're doing their job, they don't feel like it's taking them longer than they need to. They, as I said before, about printing out papers and scanning papers, that they know that you're not. When you go to the doctor, a good example is you go to the doctor's office and you go to a new doctor, and then you have to put your name in and write your social security number.
Right.
And then you do it again on the next page, and you do it again on the next page. Why do I have to do that? And it's on the same page on the back side.
Right. Why
are they making me do this? This is, and you get annoyed. Well, how about if your company makes you do that? Or how about if you're working every day and everything you do are silly things like that, or what you think is, why is this making sense?
Right.
So that's efficiencies that are really driving down the effectiveness of the organization, because not only is it taking that person longer to do the job, but now they're not motivated, and they're feeling like, what am I doing? And then they go to the core and they're like, this place is a joke, why are we working here? And they affect other people in the organization.
Right. So is there anything that you can sort of tell people is the wave of the future? I know we've talked about millennials and Gen X and now Gen Z and baby boomers. So what do you see on the horizon that really now post-COVID companies are going to be challenged with in their employee relations?
Well, I think the big thing is going to be how you deal with the mobile workforce or the hybrid workforce. How do you handle that? The biggest issue there is, it's easy to have a hybrid workforce, but the question is, how do you build on those teams? And how do you continue to build the teams? How do you get junior managers to become senior managers, regular employees to be junior managers? How do you build that and get that going? Because cultures change. You have a small team and there's 4 people at the table. Replace one person, that changes the dynamics of the culture. That 25% different. 3 months from now, the culture of that table will be completely different.
Definitely.
A company is no different. So it's hard to maintain the culture you want when you have a hybrid organization. So you have to get the balancing down of, what teams are working together, how they're working together. You do off-site events, you do different things, but it's really important that each team is having their own strategy, and then those teams have an overall strategy with the rest of the organization.
And is there ever a time when a company just should throw out the old handbook and start fresh?
Yes.
Okay, how do you know when that's the time?
Well, it's the time when you go into an organization and you ask them what they're following in their handbook versus what's in the handbook, and it's completely different, right? So, and who created this handbook? Well, someone who worked here 10 years ago did it, and they pulled it off the internet, or, it was the old thing that they had from another job. More times than not, you go into an organization and they're not following the handbook they have, which creates a lot of liability, but then also creates the other problems that we're talking about. So I think you should be reviewing the handbook. A big strategy today is not having a traditional handbook, but having a bunch of policies that create a handbook. And the reason why you do that is if you change one policy, you don't have to go through the whole handbook again to update it. So there's different strategies that we like to deploy depending on the organization, but it's really about understanding what they're trying to accomplish and then making sure they have the policies in effect that they want to follow.
Right. So besides the book, you have a company that has multiple arms that can help businesses, and it really sounds like the world's getting more complicated and more litigious and a lot more regulatory issues. So they really don't have the staff and probably don't want to have on board the staff and pay people full-time to try to handle every possibility here. They can hire out some of those.
Yeah, so our organization, we provide this HR consulting and we call it managed service, where we're actually become an extension of their staff from, we have clients as small as 35 and clients as, 4,000, actually 5,500 employees that we're doing this type of work for. So in some cases, it's a complete managed service. And what I mean by that is we are their entire HR department, from the chief HR officer, and we sit in their compensation committee meetings and everything for large organizations. And then in some areas, they hire us to do some function there, and it may be manage their employee, leave, family leave, and other employee leave, manage their comp management, managing their benefits side. So there's a lot of different areas that we can, come in for a certain area, or we can do the whole thing depending on how their team is built internally with their resources. So, in some cases, you have a senior HR person who knows that they don't have the staff that needs to get done in these different areas, and they have the functional areas they have covered and what they like to do, and then they hire us to do the blocking and tackling in certain areas. And in other cases, they don't have the resources, and we're doing everything for them in those areas.
Soup to nuts.
Yes.
Wow. So what are you excited about going forward with working with businesses?
Well, I just think that there's a very good opportunity now because it's changing so rapidly, and the investment in technology is so large that they need to deploy that they don't want to put the CapEx out to do that. So one of the things that we help them do is, in some of our relationships, we're able to put in an infrastructure for them at pennies on the dollar, where they would have had to do if they had to buy it on their own, and then we can actually implement it for them and then help support it ongoing. So I think that that's a real move in that area, and especially with consolidation, with venture capital coming in and buying companies in consolidation, we're able to help move those companies, consolidate them, and roll up the information. The biggest thing is, like, I say is that, information is the new oil, and you need that information. Management needs to have that information, actionable information at their fingertips, and we're able to create that through our integrations process so that they're able to do that and manage their company a lot more profitable and effectively.
All right, exciting. Bill Rizzo, thank you so much. Author of Maximum Accountability. You can get it on Amazon. A lot of great information packed right in there.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.